understanding it completely. God has endowed this gift, this to poet. Only he can enter into the mystery of things, and poetry makes immortal all that is the best and the most beautiful in the world. And poet deals with everything that is beautiful. He recreates the world. He makes it perfect, romantic, beautiful, explains it such a way, such a beautiful way that we understand the profound truths of life with such pleasure, so cheerfully. And then last function, so provide a moral tonic. This is the noblest function of poetry. We approach poetry for a message. We want to get a message. A poet is also a person who is very strong morally. He understands the importance of morality, the thing which makes life so good. What is goodness? Goodness is another face of beauty. Reality has got three faces: beauty, truth, and goodness. Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. That means these are the three aspects of reality, and the poet understands this. He enables us to become spiritually and emotionally rich by making us understand life, by making us see life, think about life, feel life with a whole heart. That is the function of poetry. And the kinds of poems, last of all, let us see what are the various kinds of poems, because sonnet to science is a sonnet. So that's why I want you to just give this information about the various forms of poems. There are two categories of poems. There are epics and lyrics. And in epics are objective. That means romances, tales, and narrative poems. They tell stories about life. They tell stories about life. They are stories, objective poems. And what are lyrics? Song, the film song which you love so much. What are they? They are lyrics. They are lyrics. They come straight from the heart of the poet, where the poet speaks about his own feelings. He involves his feelings in his presentation. And there are so many kinds of lyrics. Songs are lyrics, odes are lyrics, and sonnet is also a lyric. It consists of 14 lines. As you know, your teacher must have told you that a sonnet is a poem consisting of 14 lines with a particular rhyme scheme. An elegy, a sad poem, that is also a lyric where the poet speaks about his emotions. And an idyll is also a lyric. These are the various lyrics. Now let us go on to the poem which is in your course. That is Sonnet to Science by Edgar Allan Poe, American poet, and he writes here this lyric. It is also a subjective poem, a lyric where the poet speaks about his feelings for science. The poem is meant to be read aloud. Unless it is read aloud, you cannot bring out the beauty of rhythm, that music which lies in a poem. You have to read it aloud in order to bring out the rhythm, the beauty in the poem. So a poem is meant to be read aloud. Let us go through this poem by Edgar Allan Poe and see how we can enjoy it. Now I'll read the poem. Science, true daughter of old time thou art, who alterest all things with thy penetrating eye, peering eyes. Why preyest thou thus upon the poet's heart? Vulture, whose wings are dull realities, how should he love thee, or how deem thee wise, who wouldst not leave him in his wandering, to seek for treasure in the jeweled skies? albeit he soared with an undaunted wing. Hast thou not dragged Diana from her car and driven Hamadryad from the wood to seek a shelter in some happier star? Hast thou not torn the Nile from her flood, the elephant from the green grass, and from me the summer dream beneath the tamarind tree? What kind of a poem is this? What do you feel when you go through this poem? What kind of feeling does the poet want to arouse in your heart when you read it? There are certain things to ponder when you read a poem. When you read a poem, you have to find the tone in which it is written. Come on, what is the tone of the poem, Sonnet to Science? What tone the poet has adopted? The tone depends on the emotion. What kind of emotion is presented? What kind of feeling is presented in the poem? What is the feeling? Is the poet happy with science? It is a condemnation of science. He doesn't feel happy. He feels so bitter and unhappy about science, and he wants to present this feeling in this sonnet. And you can compare this sonnet with another poem in your course by Wordsworth, Table's Turn. And in that poem, Wordsworth also speaks about his attitude towards science. He condemns science like Poe. But what is the tone of that poem? He says, up, my friends, and quit your books, up, my friends, and clear your looks. What kind of tone is it? It's not sad, it's not unhappy. It's just kind of an advice given to the reader. Why do you indulge so much in the books? Why are you wasting your time? Come out in the open nature and enjoy nature. But what is the feeling presented here by Poe? What is the feeling which is presented here by Poe? It is a feeling of bitterness and happiness. He opens his heart to his reader. He wants the reader to enter his heart, to feel that bitterness with him. He says, vulture, why dost thou thus prey on a poet's heart? He called it a vulture. The strong image he has for science itself expresses his feeling, bitterness. Call it vulture. Vulture is a bird of prey, a cruel bird. It's just like a vulture attacking on that beautiful feelings of a poet, beautiful heart, the heart which is filled with the beauty of life. It is attacking that beautiful thing called the poet's heart. So, find out the tone of the poem when you read it, and thereby reaching that emotion which the poet wants to convey. And then the subject matter. This poem is a serious poem. Don't you find it serious? It's not a cheerful one. The poet expresses his resentment, and so the subject matter, the theme, the serious one. Then come the style and language. What kind of style the poet has adopted? Now, this poem is written in somewhat formal style, not informal. It's not simple. Why? Because the poet has adopted all kinds of archaic words here, old-fashioned, outdated. Thee, thou, why does thou, dost, he says, D-O-S-T, not does, why does you. He says, why dost thou thus prey on the poet's heart? And couldst, wouldst, and albeit. All these expressions, they are taken from archaic language. He wanted to create a special kind of effect. That's why he has used all these expressions in his poem, archaic expressions. He wanted to create something, some special effect perhaps, and that's why the poem is somewhat unconventional, style is unconventional, and the language is somewhat old-fashioned, archaic. Now, the poem should be an experience to be felt. You should feel the poem with your whole, open your heart to a poem when you read it. The poet wants you to enter his heart. It is a heart-to-heart talk between the poet and the reader. You have to feel the experience. It is not to be explained. You have to feel the beauty of that unique experience which the poet has. That you have to enjoy, and you can enjoy it completely only when you feel it. And that experience should be enjoyed. How can you enjoy it? You have to feel the beauty that lies in the feeling. And a poem is meant to be read aloud. You have to read it aloud. Reading aloud is a skill which has to be developed, and this can be developed through reading poetry. Practice reading poem. It gives you so much enjoyment. You get so much pleasure by reading it aloud. You enjoy the music of the poem. And then the poem should be taken in through several channels at once. It is an overall experience. You have to open all your senses in order to give an entrance to a poem in your heart. You have to visualize the images given in the poem. For example, in the sonnet, the poet describes signs as a vulture. He says, "You are a vulture," and it's written in questions, making it more powerful. "Hast thou not dragged Diana from that beautiful?" That means you can imagine, you can visualize signs, something like a monster who is approaching, the beautiful fairy sitting on her car, the beautiful moon, fairy-like lady, this monster attacking it. Hast thou not dragged Diana from a car and torn the monster, tearing off that beautiful nymph Naiad from the river? So these are the images you have to visualize. Unless you visualize them, you cannot enjoy the imagery in the poem. So you can, that means the beginning of my lesson, I gave a picture of Diana, that beautiful goddess who has been created by the Greek poets, and that beautiful world which is created by the Greek poets, inhabited by nymphs and gods and goddesses and satyrs. And this world has been attacked by cruel science. And then you have to keep your sense of music open to enjoy the music in the poem. Auditory means you have to take in the poem through the ears, enjoy the music in the poem. Then the tactile, it also has the sense of, some poems have got a sense of touch. That means you feel as if you are touching some things of beauty. And intellectual, it satisfies your intellect. What is intellect? Your mind. It gives a satisfaction to your mind. You get a higher kind of pleasure from a poem. It satisfies you mentally, it satisfies you spiritually, it satisfies you emotionally. That means you have to keep your heart open in order to enjoy the poem. You have to take in the poem in your heart. So your emotional response is also very, very necessary to enjoy a poem completely. Then, last of all, what's the message given? What is the message given in the poem? For example, in the Sonnet of Science, what is the message you take from it? Here the poet is expressing his bitterness for science. Why? Because it has destroyed the world of the poet, the world of beauty, world of romance which was created by the poet. The beautiful world has been invaded by the materialistic approach of science. Verses say, we murder to dissect. That is the approach of science. It murders things in order to study them. That is the approach which is condemned here. And by making science our master, we have destroyed that beautiful world which was created by a poet, that means we are killing a heart. Our heart is dying, our spirit is dying. Why? Because we have made science our master. Science is very, very important. It has made life so comfortable. But at the same time, it is killing our heart. It is killing that emotional aspect of a human being. Some people, intelligent races, Americans, some people, they are not at all emotionally alive. They are killing their heart. They are killing their spirit by following science in such a mad and stupid way. So we should give a place to science, but at the same time we should let our heart be alive, to take in the beauty of life, to maintain the romance of life, to maintain the beauty of life. Let us keep our heart alive. That is the message given here in this poem, here in this poem by Edgar Allan Poe. So poetry is something that is so beautiful. We enjoy poetry through songs. That means songs which are poems accompanied with music and melody. We are fascinated with songs, but the kind of poetry which is written sometimes nowadays, it cannot be called a poetry which can become immortal. The first preoccupation of a poet is to make his poetry immortal, make it permanent in the history of humanity, in the history of literature. But how many poems can occupy that place? So many poems written on the scientific themes. Scientific themes are transcend, as I told you, that themes which a poetry is based on, they are unchanging, they are timeless, they are about the unchanging human heart. But many of the poems which are written nowadays, they are based on our transient feelings. They cannot be immortalized. And great poetry is immortal. It gives us a vision of heaven. It takes us close to God. As Tagore says that he didn't find any difference between his religious experience and his poetic experience. Only a great poet is endowed with that gift of taking us closer to heaven, giving us a glimpse of paradise. So these are the things which I want my students to ponder on while they read poetry. And Now, shall we go back to the content of my lecture so that we can have a glance at all the topics which we dealt with in this lesson. I spoke about what poetry is. You must be having a clear idea of what poetry is. Need for poetry. Why do we need poetry? Why has it become important, more important present day life? And what is great poetry and requisites of poetry? Then I spoke about the language used in poetry, which is not familiar, and a poetry lesson can be a very bad language lesson because you don't learn much language through poetry. And then subject matter, which is usually used in poetry. What is the subject matter on which great poetry is based? And then I spoke about the kinds of poems, and how to read a poem. And you must have learned how to read it in order to enjoy it completely. You should derive complete enjoyment from poem. And